If you're here, you really, really believe that a life lived beyond fear and in alignment with your true self is the key to freedom and fulfillment. So it's for the rebels, it's for the creatives, it's for the ambitious, it's for the misunderstood, and it's for those who really know that being brave and just being yourself is a lot easier said than done. So my goal with this podcast is to introduce you to the people and the practical tools that will help you actually be brave, align with your true self, and create the freedom and fulfillment that you desire in all areas of your life. And remember, you're a lot closer than you think. Today's guest is a success mastery coach and wealth healer for high achievers and leaders. She's also a mum to 2 beautiful boys, a multi-7-figure online entrepreneur, spiritual CEO, and creator of the Success Saboteur archetypes. She's a true expander in the online coaching industry. Not only does she go to the deepest depths of healing with her clients, she creates space for their sustainable quantum leaps. The vibe I get from Natasha is like the older sister that you can have lots of fun with and will always have your back, but who will give it to you straight when you need it. The one that inspires you to be all that you can be, but is never in competition with you. She knows there's room for everyone to shine. In 2014, she launched her first business, making guilt-free health foods in a tiny kitchen in her rented 1-bedroom home. She was barely making ends meet while she juggled her business and her full-time social work career. She manifested a baby after being told she was infertile. And when that baby was just 10 months old, she manifested her true love within weeks of asking for him. Just short years ago, she made the decision to pivot her business to success and transformation coaching and stepped into her soul's purpose of helping other entrepreneurs heal their childhood wounds to unlock more success, and became one of the top young entrepreneurs in her country. She quite literally quantum leaped her way into millions and is on a mission to help others do the same, without sacrifice to their health and their relationships. Today, she's the CEO of 2 companies, her personal brand and the School of Healing Mastery, where she teaches her healing methods to others. She changes lives through her Ultimate Up-Level Academy, a wildly successful online coaching and healing container that has served and transformed thousands of women's lives and businesses all over the world, which has given her the impact, the freedom, and the fulfillment she always envisioned for herself and her young family.
All right, let's just jump straight into it. So before I get started with the questions, I just want to say, I just feel a real heart-to-heart connection with you, Natasha, because obviously I've been following you for a little while, and I've just, I see your posts, and I've truly never seen somebody who's so consistent, like, with your posts. But not only that, like, they're just all so heartfelt. Like, they're not just random posts. Like, they all have depth and story, and like, they just get me every time. Like, every time you post, I'm like, okay, I've got to read this. Like, it's just amazing. So yeah, I'm super excited to just chat with you today. And there's I want to break it up into kind of 2 phases. So the first is just like, I really want to talk about healing and just your journey, but also your work and everything that you do with that, because that's probably, the thing that I'm most passionate about. And I just love it. I love your work. And then the second kind of phase, I want to talk about marketing and sales, because you're also a genius at that. So, and also the way that you market your healing services, which I think so many people, like women that will be watching this, will either be on an awakening and healing journey, or they'll be spiritual entrepreneurs and healers and coaches and consultants, like people who want to market their services. So I feel like, yeah, both of those, if we can dive into that, would be so amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I guess I just want to, sometimes I've noticed that even as a coach, like, we have our stories that we like go to, like the conversion story of like, well, this is like my big breakdown, and then, how it all goes up from there. But I'd just love to hear more like your origin story, so people can know, like, yeah, just where you're from, like, and how you just kind of ended up where you are today.
Yeah, sure. It's hard to choose the bits.
Yeah, because I know there's probably so many. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you have such a diverse story too. Like, I know you have a really like diverse story, and I just think a lot of people can relate, but also would just love to hear, because it's really a transformational. It's really amazing. So
Yeah, thank you. So I think, one of the key things, I guess, about my story, and not everybody knows this, is probably I've been through every kind of trauma that you can imagine, which I guess is a bit of your initiation into being a healer, and being someone who helps others through healing. And trauma started in my life from a very young age. So I was born to very young parents who did not stay together very long. I went through a lot of childhood abuse for most of my childhood years, most of my teenage years, so what I'd call chronic childhood abuse. Bullying as well, because one of my ways of coping with that abuse was to gain lots of weight. And so then I was bullied for being overweight, and wearing glasses and braces and any little thing that children will pick on you for. So I did not have a very happy childhood, and felt very out of place, I think, in this world, didn't feel like I belonged anywhere, really. So most of my childhood and teenagers were not very happy years in my life, and I think I spent a long time looking for love externally, looking for a man that could rescue me, not realizing actually at that point that the true person who was going to rescue me was me.
Yes. Do you think you had like codependent tendencies? Or do you think you just had like an attachment? Because I find like it either goes like one of two ways. Like you either end up, I don't know, really narcissistic and just like, end up perpetuating the patterns, or you can end up, being a codependent or addiction or like other kind of coping mechanisms.
Yeah, absolutely. I think not everyone wants to resonate with the word codependent sometimes, but it's definitely something that I work on with people as well. The phone-in trauma response that comes linked with that. But I had a lot of narcissistic relationships. I had a lot of addictions as well. So I had food addiction as a child, and I had exercise addiction, dabbled with, things that you shouldn't really dabble with as a teenager. Coping mechanisms, a lot of it was.
It's actually interesting because when I think about it, I probably had a lot of those too, but I'm actually working on this a little bit at the moment, but I'm like, there's a fine line between denial and like denying kind of just your truth and your reality, because I feel like there is a spectrum, right? Like it's not like if you're like, if I say I'm a codependent, it means like, I don't know, something really bad, because I think, there is this like, people don't want to be put in those boxes, and I certainly don't either. But then it's also like, okay, but then what if you're in denial and you actually need to claim those things? Because when you said like exercise addiction, I was like, I so relate to that, because when I was living on the Gold Coast, which is a town about 8 hours away from here, before I met my partner. And this is like a really small country town. And on the Gold Coast, it's like a very active lifestyle. It's like the beach. It's like there's so many things to do, and it's just always active. And I was always like exercising like twice a day sometimes. But also, you may relate to this, but I'm a manifesting generator, and I'm just like, I have so much energy all the time. And so I need to release that pressure. And so exercise was that way. But it wasn't until I moved here that I really realized how actually addicted to it I was. And like, I didn't know how to actually cope and feel just emotionally okay without that kind of accountability. And so I had to work through like so much of that. And I didn't actually realize until I changed my environment that I was like, oh, wow, it really was an addiction. But I wouldn't call it a bad one, because it made me healthy. It made me really it was great for my energy. But then also it did limit me in lots of ways, because I realized when I came here, I was like, actually, I would have been subconsciously probably avoiding so many opportunities or experiences because of my addiction to the thing that I wouldn't have realized until I came here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All addictions serve a purpose. And yes, you could call an exercise addiction much healthier than an illegal drug addiction.
Yeah, but it
and I
totally
actually,
can be.
yeah, it can be, but also it depends on how far it goes. So I ended up being infertile because I was really breaking my body down and almost like punishing my body. And I remember feeling like, oh, this pain that you feel from over exercising and chronically exercising, feeling good, feeling in that pain because it was taking me away from the pain that was inside. And I almost hadn't even accepted the full extent of my trauma at that point in my life. That's what so that addiction to exercise started, I think, around the age of about 17 until about 25, 26. So quite a long period of time. And also that was mixed with eating disorders as well. So bulimia mostly. And I injured myself. I slipped discs in my back and I still couldn't stop, even when I had slipped discs. Like, it was really, really bad. And to the point then I was actually diagnosed as infertile. I have 2 children now, so that obviously turned around.
Amazing.
But I actually worked in the addiction field. I was actually the top psychology graduate in my course, went into homelessness services, working with people with addictions. And I was so in denial. I was just like, oh, I haven't got an addictive personality. This is what I used to tell myself because I work with people with such severe addiction, drug addiction.
Compared to you, you were like, I'm not even on that scale. Okay, that makes sense.
And I think we do that to minimize our own stuff as well. Like, oh, other people have been through worse, or other people are in worse.
We don't realize how we're an energetic match. And I don't like using that word, but it's like subconsciously it's something's there. And sometimes we are pulled to those fields for certain reasons. My mom was a social worker. And actually, I mean, I'm not going to talk too much about, but I also pretty much have experienced every kind of trauma besides probably physical abuse at the hands of like a man, but definitely in my childhood, like and emotional and narcissism and all of that, like really dysfunctional patterns in the family. And my parents divorced only when I was about 21, which is kind of weird, but it almost felt harder because of the age that I was at. I was actually just graduating university. And it was a really, really terrible divorce. Like, it was not like you'd think, like the whole idea was like, oh, we'll divorce when the kids are older. But it was so much worse than probably what would have happened if we were younger. But yeah, so my mum was a social worker for most of her life. And every day I just remember her coming home crying, upset about something, like it just wasn't good. And it was funny because all my life she told me like I should do social work. And I was like, why would I do that when like you didn't even like it? And it was like you're getting paid really not well for a really tough job, like just emotionally taxing as well. Like, and so I really didn't go down that path. When actually I probably would have been, I'm a healer too at heart. So I probably would have worked really well, but I think subconsciously I didn't, because I was like, well, I saw how unhappy you were. So why would I do that?
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think like it is certain types of people that go into social work professions, and a lot of the time, like all the training I had, I did a degree. I was the top performing student in my psychology degree. I did addictive studies for master's level and also social work at master's level. Had all this experience, yet none of that prepared me for actually recognizing and healing my own trauma.
Okay, so tell me about the awakening, or if there was one, or how did you kind of come to a place of...
Do you know, I think we have like several, I think we have several awakenings. There's, you know, there's many pivotal points on the journey. But one of the biggest ones in terms of changing my life, because I'd been in a string of, you know, bad relationships, narcissistic men, abusive men.
Yeah.
Again, not always, looking back, not always recognizing it fully, how bad it was at that time.
Yeah.
Until one point where I was almost killed by an ex-partner.
Yeah.
And that was like a massive wake-up call for me, that I was, you know, disrespecting myself and, you know, really looking for love in the wrong places.
Yeah.
So although that wasn't like the key transformation in my healing journey, it was more like a self-worth point for me, that actually I can't continue to live like this, or I'm not going to be here anymore. You know, I'm putting myself in danger.
Yeah.
And it was that moment where I really turned my life around in terms of knuckling down in my studies, not disrespecting myself, and trying to like move away from the types of relationships I was getting myself into. But also there was a baby loss associated to that relationship too. And that had more of an impact on me, I think, than the almost killing me, which sounds really strange to say, but having
no,
not
it doesn't
had
at all. That makes, you know, a lot of sense, because that's one of the biggest, you know, things that a woman can go through. So
yeah, and like I think this is something that people don't talk about a lot, because there's a lot of shame around it. It was you know, an abortion. It wasn't a miscarriage, it was an abortion, because I believed I had no safe place to bring that child into the world at that particular time. It was the man that had tried to kill me that was the father of that baby.
yeah.
So, but that was such a big thing for me to actually get over. It affected me for years. It was one of the reasons that my exercise addiction completely escalated out of control. This almost like this way of punishing myself, punishing my body for what I did.
Yeah.
And I actually, you know, would come across abortion trauma quite a lot, because even though it's seen as a choice, it's not actually a choice. Like all of the time, women feel like that is the only option, depending on what's going on and the circumstances that have led to that.
Yeah, which is a really interesting conversation that we could get into based on so many things. But yeah, I think we could be here all night to talk about that. Did you find how did you start to heal that? Was it shame? Was it guilt? Was it all of it? Like, how did you start to?
Guilt, so much guilt, but shame as well. But I think mostly it was guilt, because I really wanted to be a mother. More than anything in the world.
Okay.
But at that point in my life,
which is interesting, because I only say that because most, I mean, in my experience, and I grew up with some female cousins and just like other people in my lineage, where it's like when there is a lot of trauma, just emotional, physical, and all that. I actually never really had that maternal desire. I do now, because I'm in a really healthy, loving relationship, like with my soulmate, which is the only kind of good relationship I've ever had in my life, which, you know, I met him when I was 30. Before that, I never had the maternal desire. It's almost like being with him like made that desire come out. But before that, I really maybe it was suppressed, I don't know, but I just never had that, because of what happened, like the trauma that I had growing up, and just the lack of joy, and so I just always associated like having kids with being really hard and really frustrating and really all of this. And so but it is natural for us to want that.
Yeah, but also not everybody wants that either. But yeah, it's totally natural to want it. And I've had a lot of clients myself, actually, that have almost like not had children out of fear that they will end up being the type of parent that they had. So that is
Yes, I do have that fear in some ways, but I've done so much work that, it's like, you can't live your life in fear, and you know that even if you're having that thought, it's kind of like you're self-aware.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
already you're steps ahead. Yeah. 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 Amazing.
We're going deep today, aren't we?
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. I go deep. That's just me. I actually, which we'll talk about content, because, I personally have had my own struggles with marketing, even though my background is actually in corporate marketing. Like, I spent 10 years, all my 20s, in advertising and marketing roles. But that's a whole nother story. And it did, like, I didn't find coaching until about 3 years ago, where it just felt really aligned. But so you mentioned worth. I'd love to hear your take on self-worth and like what you think a woman's worth is, because it's interesting. So when I look back in my 20s and like my early 20s and my teenage years especially, I was like, oh yeah, man, I definitely did not have any self-worth. But at the same time, as I started to do the work and I started to awaken, and I really started to just do the work and heal a lot of my wounds and traumas and just relational patterns that were really unhealthy, I really moved away just from the conversation of self-worth. It's like, you kind of go, well, I went through this phase of like, it was just like, okay, know your worth, know your worth, know your worth. But I never really knew what it meant. For me, I guess it was more about actually respect. I was like, okay, I just need to learn how to be like, I need to set boundaries so that I'm just base level, just respected by the people around me. And then it kind of just grew from there. But I'd just love to hear your take on, because I know you do a lot of that actually in your work, like just what you talk about, weight and wealth, like it's all connected actually to our worth. So yeah, just love to hear.
So, I think everybody's got a different definition of what like self-worth and self-love and things like that mean. But
would you say they're the same, like self-worth and self-love?
No, I believe they're different. So for self-worth, to me, that is what you believe that you deserve in life.
Yeah. Yes, I resonate with that.
Yeah, and that was such a huge journey for me. It's actually connected to one of the Success Saboteurs, which is probably my biggest one, which is also linked to the addictions. And
which Success Saboteur?
That's the Hustler Saboteur, and which is a bit self-explanatory. But that also then took me to work addiction later in, as I started to overcome these. It was just like replacing one addiction with another. Some which more socially acceptable to have a work addiction or an exercise addiction than some of the other things.
Do you know Gabor Mate?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I'm reading his book at the moment. But yeah, he talks a lot about his work addiction, like workaholism, and how he just replaced one addiction with the other, which is like common.
Yeah. I feel like an affinity with Gabor Mate because we've got such a similar background. We both worked in homelessness services, in addiction field.
Yes, he did. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. I do. He's a bit of an idol of mine. I look up to him.
Of course, I love him too. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think there was moments in my life where I showed glimmers of worth, like, realizing, okay, this is wrong. These types of relationships, I deserve more than this. But knowing it and feeling it, I think, are so different and have a different level of power behind them.
It's like, do you think it's an identity thing? Like it's
Yeah, definitely. Because actually to really feel worthy, everyone's approach is different, but my approach is, okay, you need to actually find the root of what actually made you feel that you weren't worthy, because you were born worthy. We're not born thinking I'm not worthy. That happens at some point along the way. And particularly for me, because it does impact our identity, is what was the not the root experience, but what was actually the relationship that caused me to feel unworthy.
So it goes back to a relationship.
Yeah, that's a key difference with the way that I work.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So of course, root experiences are important as well in the healing journey, but actually, what I've seen is the biggest hurt and also the biggest transformation can come from healing the relationship behind that experience.
Yeah. I will say that when I met my partner, actually, I have a really weird story. Like, I mean, I did a lot of work already before I met him, but when I met him, so much stuff came up, like so much more stuff that I didn't even know needed to come out, like more grieving, more everything. But not because of him. He was amazing. Like, he was able to hold it all, which most men probably would struggle with, but he's very, he's Fijian, he's very compassionate, very loving culture. So I'm really lucky. But yeah, so that I was able to do so much healing because of that relationship. Like, it brought up so much for me, and it actually healed a lot of the wounds that actually came from other people, but I was able to heal it through my relationship with him, even though it wasn't directly to do with him.
Yeah, that's amazing. So it sounds like he was your safe place then, and I had a similar experience with mine.
It was like the only truly, like, I have amazing friends, but it was the truly first intimately, like, safe space that I've had where I truly felt unconditional love. I don't want to cry. I'm going to cry. It was like the first time in my life where I truly felt, like unconditional love, where it was just like so true. And it just all came up. Like, it was just, when I moved here, like, I cried for like months. Like, I just cried for months, and like, it was weird. It was like a whole nother, but it was like, it was different. It was just a very healing experience. And then I just almost felt reborn after it. And again, I felt like a new kind of joy. It felt just like a joy that was, like, just based in this like safety that I just never experienced before. So anyway.
That's amazing. I'm so happy.
Thank you.
So it's very powerful, that, like, to say, the relationship healing, because the way I tend to explain it to people is, the difference between being attacked by a stranger in the street, that is extremely traumatic. Yes. But being attacked by someone,
a family member,
who you're meant to love, who's meant to love you, who's meant to protect you. There's a whole other level of trauma.
It goes so deep. Yes.
On top of being attacked, it's like, oh my God, that person is meant to be my protector, my parent, or whatever, or, it's this whole other level of shame and confusion, and there must be something so wrong with me if my own parent treats me that way. It's a whole other level of identity issues that it creates. The other thing that comes up is that we come from both of our parents, of course, and if one of our parents was not a very nice person, we can make that mean something about our identity too. The fear of being like them, or not wanting to be like them, or believing that deep down you might be like them, and all the stuff that brings up. And actually, I've seen that probably healing your parent wounds is one of the biggest relationship trauma shifts that you can make. We all have parent wounds. You don't have to have gone through what we consider big traumas for that to happen. It could just be simple as never feeling good enough, or your parent was hypercritical because they were a perfectionist and they never felt good enough. There's all these things.
And when you think, when I think straight away, just even with me, like, yes, okay, you don't have to have trauma, you don't have to have anything extreme happen, but even generationally, like, even when we start to look at, if we start to go into, especially just even social media, like the world of social media in general, like, which wasn't even a thing in their day, like, like, there was so much for me around career. And so I was in corporate marketing for years, and when I made the switch to wanting to just have more impact and just I guess, go on this journey to find my soul's purpose, even though I don't like that. But I was more just on a journey. I was like, okay, I want more meaning in my work. And I started freelancing, and I started, working with entrepreneurs and doing their marketing and all of that. It took me a year or two to really start to realize, okay, there's some huge resistance here around me even being an entrepreneur, even being somebody who's self-led, who has this kind of freedom in the world. Like there was so much resistance there. And then if you talk about marketing yourself online, it was just like a whole nother it was a whole nother can of worms, because because I mean, even where I'm from, I'm Croatian. My background's Eastern European, so that's why I also have an affinity to Gabor, because he's like German, or he's from there. But yeah, it's just using social media, other than like basically trying to portray like that you have the perfect life, and like me sharing like my truth online was just like, I had to block some family members. Like, it just gets really weird. And if people don't use social media in that way, it's just generationally, it's just so different. So there's that element too, because then you have to explain like, okay, my career is like, they just don't even understand.
But also family members are in denial about the past too, because they don't want, sometimes they can't even admit to themselves that that's the type of parent that they were. And so they have, coping mechanisms, denial, minimization, not to gaslight you always, but more gaslight themselves, that they never acted in that way.
For sure. Yeah. So how then did you, because I want to talk about the Success Saboteurs. I think that's really important, because like how you even came to create those, and maybe you can speak a little bit about them.
I will. I just want to share a little bit more on that worth piece, which is like pivotal to how the Success Saboteurs came about then. So I, many years later, I'd healed my body through natural ways to get my fertility back, unexpectedly. Over the course of like the next, probably like 5 years or so, I was able to heal my body naturally. It came as a surprise to me, but I'd taken measures to heal my body naturally. I eventually fell pregnant. Took me by surprise, but it was very much wanted. And I was in a different position in my life at that point. I had a social work career then, my own little one-bed house, and I was renting at the time. I had just more my own safety and security that I could offer that child at that point in my journey. And although it wasn't the right relationship, I felt able to be a single mum, essentially. And I think becoming a mum was another big healing experience for me, and it almost put me into a healing crisis.
But can I ask, how did you go from being infertile to did you just work because you knew the healing, like what you needed to do for yourself, or did you go to therapy, or like what was the kind of journey?
So at that point, I actually was diagnosed at a private clinic because I'd been in a relationship for a year and hadn't fallen pregnant. We weren't trying, but we were more like, let's just see if it happens. And if it happens, that'll be great. Yeah. It wasn't happening. So that was concerning me. And I knew deep down it's because of all the damage I'd caused my own body. Yeah. So when I was diagnosed with unexplained infertility, I was like, I know the explanation deep down, but I wasn't on the outside. I looked like a healthy young woman to any doctor. They didn't know everything I was going through with my food and my exercise habits at that point. That was deeply like traumatic for me to find out that I'd and I almost felt like I was being punished for having the abortion at that earlier stage of my journey. And I, spent many days in tears thinking that I was never going to have. Sorry, I'm getting emotional now. That I was never going to have the family that I wanted and the child that I wanted. And I got pregnant. I almost accidentally, or thinking that I wasn't actually able to have children. But I'd been making changes to my health, not in terms of trying to fix this infertility. I didn't know that was possible at that point. On reflection, I could see that just, this natural approach to healing my body had helped me heal my fertility at the time. So yeah,
was it like emotional? Were you working on emotions, or was it just a lifestyle change, like in general?
It was more like natural supplements and trying to address. I think I thought I had adrenal fatigue at the time. There was issues with my menstrual cycle, like my hair was falling out, all these things. So I had to make physical changes. So I reduced the exercise. I was exercising twice a day, and I then reduced to once a day. And was, really looking at stress reduction and natural supplements to heal all the different issues that with my sleep, with my hair, with my menstrual cycle.
I love that you brought up stress, because I think sometimes we don't even realize how stressed we are, and that can be causing so many of like the blockages, internally. And
I do believe that in some ways that I was. That my first baby was a bit of a miracle baby, and all avenues of my business as it's grown over the years have been spiritually guided as well. And
I want to talk about that.
At one point I received this really weird message from my angels, that if I expanded, at the time I just had this health food business, that if I expanded into helping other women with their health, not just through health foods, that the outcome was going to be children. And I did not know what that meant at that point, because I don't work with children in my business. I work with women, and I just didn't understand what it meant at that point. And then when I created my first online course, which was a course helping women heal their bodies and transform their bodies, because I had a health business at that point. It was the same time I created that course that I conceived my first child.
Wow.
So I feel like that he was a gift as well, that it wasn't just a completely natural thing. I stepped into my purpose at that point in my journey, and I was rewarded with my child, I feel. Yeah. But having him was the proper catalyst for my healing journey then. Because I had a traumatic birth, and all of that stuff that I'd buried for so long just come to the surface. And I didn't want, I at that point in the journey, it was like, I wanted to be the best mum I could be for him. And so I couldn't just pretend all of this past stuff hadn't happened anymore and bury it. I had to deal with it. All my coping mechanisms were taken away. I couldn't exercise because I had a lot of injuries from the birth, so couldn't exercise, couldn't drink because I got a child to look after, couldn't go out partying and then party it all away like I might have when I was younger. So I was faced with this the stark reality of having to heal my childhood trauma. And for a part of that, I ended up with postnatal depression, left the relationship I was in, and left my job as well, and decided to go all in on my business. And that's, I guess, the origin of the business and what it is now. But it was more I found the worthiness to do it for him first, before I was able to fully feel that ability to do it for myself.
Did you have the desire to have $1 million business? Was that the desire? Because I know, you know, in the coaching industry, it's a really big thing. And it's funny because when I quit my course, so I was in corporate marketing, and at about 28, I quit. It was not like a planned thing. Like, it wasn't like, okay, I'm doing this really logically and I'm going to have, you know, a backup and I'm going to, you know, make some money in my business and then quit. Like, I wish it was like that. But it was not like that for me. Like, it was full blown, my body shut down, like nervous breakdown, panic attack, like full freeze mode, to the point where it got to a point where I took a week off work and I just literally couldn't get out of bed. Like, I was so, I would say depressed, but I feel like it was almost like a nervous breakdown. Like, it was just like my path was just not, it was just not an aligned path anymore, but I had no direction of like where else to go and what else to do. And so I was really feeling like, I hate the word, but like lost. Like, I just felt really like, what is, because for like a year before that, I was trying to look for other jobs. Even though I was really like, it was a really, I was getting paid really well. So like, I had a high paying career. I had worked like pretty much my whole 20s, like, to kind of climb the corporate ladder. And so that whole paradigm was just kind of breaking for me. It was like a paradigm breakdown where I was just like, okay, I don't like, it's not the money for me. Like, it's not, because I'm like, I'm earning really well, but I'm so miserable. So I'm like, so this is not it. And so that paradigm was just like, so, like it just shook my whole world, because I was just like, this is what I thought I was working so hard for. But it was this I spoke to somebody the other day, and it was like, I felt trapped by conformity. That's what it was. I was so trapped. I had no freedom. And actually, one of my biggest drivers is freedom. And I kind of knew that deep down. Like, I traveled a lot. I used that as an escape mechanism. But yeah, I traveled a lot. And so, yeah, I felt really trapped. And the idea of like being in that job for the next 5 years, buying a house, like settling down, like they say, was just, honestly, it just felt so horrible in my body that I was like, I can't do that. Like, it just felt so, and I realize now it was because a lot of my trauma too, like that idea of just feeling suffocated and trapped in something, like the inner child in me just felt trapped, like she couldn't go anywhere. And so, yeah, I just ended up, I couldn't also find a job. I was either like overqualified or underqualified, and I just could not find anything. And I looked for like months and months. There was also many scenarios, just being like, just lots of leadership that I encountered that was just almost that traumatized me in ways that I realized I just buried and kind of got over. But when I look back, I'm like, it was just so horrible. Like, I remember, just a quick story, but I remember going to this interview, and I was a digital marketer. So it was a lot of performance marketing. So I was doing Facebook ads, Google ads. Like, that was kind of my expertise. And I worked for an online dating company for 5 years. And we generated like hundreds of that, like tens of thousands of leads a day. And so like, that was my expertise. But I did some social organic stuff as well. And like, I did branding stuff as well, but mostly like performance marketing. So anyway, I went to this company. It was like an e-commerce store on the Gold Coast. There's lots of e-commerce kind of brands on the Gold Coast in Australia. And it was these two young guys, and they had this up and coming brand. Their goal was to hit like $100 million. Like, when I look back, I'm like, gosh, it was so insane. It was probably not that it wasn't possible, but it was just like the level of expectation that they had was just unrealistic. And so I went in there, and they're like, can you do this test for us? They really liked me. They got me back for a second interview. Can you do this like test? We want to see like what campaign you can create. And in my gut, I was like, I really don't want to do this. This is like free work that I'm doing for them. But I really liked the idea. I liked the brand. I was like, you know, it'd be fun to work there. It was like a lot of young people, like on a similar, you know, journey. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to do it. And so I created this like messenger bot campaign, and they took it and they just ran with it. and they never got me back for a second interview. And I literally, they set it live. They set the campaign live. I saw it like on my news feed. And I remember speaking to the recruiter and I was like, do you know these people are getting people in for interviews, asking them to do tests, like create campaigns and then using them, saying that they're like testing them out. But really, I'm like, you're making money off it. And so there was a lot of that. And I went to like 2 interviews like that.
I've seen that. Like that's happened to some of my friends in the space as well.
It's so bad, Natasha. And it's honestly what led me out of the industry, because I was like, I hate this so much. Like there's so much of a lack of integrity. And you're up against people with like, you know, they were like multi-millionaires with like so much power and money. It's like, what am I going to do? Like, I can't fight them. Like, they don't give a shit about me and my story. And like, you know, they just don't care. And so the recruiter was just like, oh yeah, really sorry that happened, but like nothing we can do. And
so you just reminded me of something that happened to me when I was a 6-figure business at the time. And I was very good at organic marketing, and someone who was a 8-figure business owner wanted me to deliver my organic marketing training to their membership with hundreds, I think, or thousands of people in. It would have been a very great opportunity.
Yeah.
But I had to sign over all of the rights to this work for something like $500. And I asked to see the contract and make sure that I retained the rights to my work before that happened. And I was basically told, you should be grateful for this opportunity. And now we no longer want you for daring to ask questions to protect.
Yeah. That just, that's pretty much the vibe. That's what it was. And that was the vibe. It was like, you should be grateful that, you know, you even got caught. And that happened a couple of times. And other interviews I went to was just like, I could see like there were a lot of e-com stores, like e-commerce stores, and there were a lot of fashion brands, really successful brands. But the culture was just so toxic. Like I felt it even just walking in. I was like, I don't know how anybody is, especially a woman, because I will say, you know, women, we have to think about our health and our stress levels and all of these things, because it affects everything in our life, our relationships. I'm like, and so, anyway, when I looked up the chain, I was like, a lot of these people are so miserable. They're so unhappy. They're just like workhorses, and they're really just unaware in so many ways. And so, I felt really crappy going into a lot of them. And I just ended up being like, I can't even be in this industry anymore. There's nothing about it that lights me up, which is a shame, because it was like a real passion of mine. And and that's kind of what led me on a journey of like entrepreneurship. And so I was doing freelancing and stuff, just working with small entrepreneurs, which I loved, but I was definitely attracting a lot of unaligned people. I had really bad, like all the success saboteurs that you talk about, like all of them. It was just me, the hustler, the overgiver, the all of them. So I'd love to let's talk about if you can say the 4 of them and like a little bit about them, because I think a lot of women will and just entrepreneurs will relate to it and see where it comes up, because I have some thoughts about the overgiver one too that I'd love to ask you, but sure. So also in answer to your previous question, I did not ever believe that I would have a 7-figure or multi-7-figure company. And it was like you didn't know. Oh, sorry. I didn't finish. What I meant was I kind of went off on a tangent. Sorry.
I did that as well.
So when I quit my job, I was earning close to 6 figures in my corporate career, and I quit. And I went to Bali for a month. I was like, I'm just going on a like sabbatical, on a hiatus. And it was the best thing I ever did. Like it was really, really good, really healing, amazing experience. And I realized, I definitely just want to work like as an entrepreneur for myself. But I never, and that also I realized a lot of my money wounds and financial trauma also came up from this journey, which I'm super grateful for now. But back then I was like, there was, I guess the biggest thing for me is like, I'm not driven by money. Like, sure, I like money, I love money, like go for it, create as much money as you want, but I'm not driven by it. So it's like, you know, when you're in, it's so obvious when you're in a corporate career, because all they try and do is throw money at you to either stay or keep you. Like, they don't really think about all the other, especially for a woman, like a lot of women don't really care about the money. They actually care more about time, like maybe time off with their children, or like, you know, or title, even titles. Like for me, it was like more a ceiling thing. I was like, there's nowhere else for me to grow though. Like you can even pay me more, but my title's going to be the same. My experience is going to be the same. Like everything's going to stay the same. And I'm bored, and I've been here for 5 years. And like, there's, you know, and it's like, they wanted to keep me happy, but there was just there was nowhere for me to grow. And life is about expansion. And I'm like, there's no expansion here for me. So, so it's like, I'm not really driven by that. And I found that the hardest transition, because getting into entrepreneurship, it's like, you have to have money goals. Like you have to create profit, and you have to do these things. And so I found that. And so I ended up definitely in this like femme world of like, just, you know, feminine business that's flowy, but really you can't, like, it doesn't work. Like you do need the masculine structure. You do need the strategy, the sales, and all of that. So that's something I'm integrating, and I've done a lot of work around, and I'm excited about it. But yeah, like I definitely ended up on that train, because as I entered the like especially the feminine leadership and like coaching, which I think is so amazing, really. Like it gave me the pathway, because I was like, oh my gosh, like there's a pathway for me. Like that was so liberating, and that was so great in itself. But yeah, I just realized like it just became all about the money. And I was like, I'm not even inspired. I'm not even, And so there was no desire for that, really. It was really, when I look back, like freedom more than anything. And when you have earned, like especially in a corporate career, when you are earning that amount and you realize it's not about that, you are kind of forced to, and I guess it's a little bit easier in the sense you don't have the responsibility of a business or employees and all these other things. So like, in that sense, I did have the time to think about like, okay, well, if this is what I've been working so hard for, and I'm not happy and I feel trapped, like basically it was like, I just felt like I was angry, because I was like, I just feel like I've been lied to my whole life. Like I thought this was the goal. Like this is what I went to university for. This is what I worked. So I moved to Sydney when I finished university. I made all these sacrifices to climb the corporate ladder and build my career. And it's like, and this is not it. It was such a mini crisis, like really like a midlife mini crisis. And so, anyway, so I was asking, I was like, so the desire didn't really start for you. It was probably like, it was just more like following your passion or your intuition. Like you said, I'd love to hear what you're like about the spiritually led, and just like intuitively led business, and how most of your success has been about that, because I think people would be like, like you're extremely successful, and that's, congratulations. And it's so amazing. And I just, and the fact that you've done it in such a spiritual and intuitive way is so inspiring. So I'd love to hear about that.
I think you shared some really good points there, about the whole like feminine and masculine. And I think what happens, because of our wounds, we go too far either way rather than having that balance. And especially my own journey, I was very, very much in my masculine energy, much more in my masculine energy.
Yeah.
Work hard, hustler being the biggest sensitive for me. Yeah. But it was unsustainable. And I'm aware of that saboteur coming up a lot, even in this journey now, even though I've done loads of healing. Every new level we grow to, there's more layers that come up. For me, there was definitely a focus on survival, because I was a single mum to a child. So there was a certain level of money that I thought I need this much to cover my bills and keep the roof over our heads. But my business was born from passion, and at no point, I used to dream that, maybe this could be a 6-figure business. I definitely think I could achieve that. But it was through doing what I love.
Yep.
Through service to my audience, to my clients, and just healing the things that were stopping me from being able.
Sorry. So it started off with the health course, like you were selling the health programs, and then did you transition into healing, like the healing business and the success?
Yeah, so I was I was selling health food that I was making at home, health related online programs. And then I trained in a subconscious therapy, a hypnotherapy based tools to bring deeper work to the women that I wanted to serve that had addictions around food. So that was my journey up till that point, and also my sole purpose up to that point. And I really believe as you evolve, your sole purpose evolves as well.
That's so true.
And it was when I started to receive that subconscious work that I started my true healing journey, the stuff that I didn't know was there, that was really ready to come out and be healed at that point. And at that point in my journey, I'd been trying to get a 5K month in my business for a really long time. That was like my first thing, that 5K month, I'll be able to cover all of the bills and, have enough left over to take my child places, and that will feel like a safe amount for me. But I just could not hit it. And I was trying to get there for we're talking, I was 3 years into my business at this point. So it was a side business, of course, and then it became my full-time thing. But then when I started healing the things like why I felt not enough and my mother wound, this was the first part of my journey. My business actually exploded financially.
Wow.
As a side effect. I wasn't doing anything different.
Right.
This is the amazing thing. Like, I'd been trying to get that 5K month for so long, and I literally went straight past it to a 7K month.
Wow.
And I just thought, is this a fluke? What's going on here? But every month, then it was 10K months, then it was 12K, then it was 16K. And this was all in the space of a year. But
had you discovered the Success Saboteurs by now?
So no, not at that point. So at that point, I was talking about, so what happened was women started to approach me, and women that I knew from networking and things, and they had seen my business explode. And they said, whatever you are doing, we want some of it. And for a long time, I'd known I was meant to serve women in business, but I was confused. Like, intuitively, I knew that, but I didn't want to be a business coach. So at that point, I didn't know what that was or how. Yeah. But then it just found me almost, all these women like what you've done.
Yeah.
So then I innovated subconscious healing specifically for business success.
Yes.
And it really was the same things you do to heal food addiction. It's the root stuff underneath the side effect is they're holding themselves back in their businesses, or they're struggling with eating issues, like whatever that side effect is. It is a side effect of what is really going on underneath. And it's all about, their self-love, their self-worth, how much they trust themselves, all these different things.
Yeah.
And it was a couple of years later, actually, that the Saboteurs work came out. So I kept seeing these same issues with everyone. I just thought they were blocks at that point. And then I dreamt about the Success Saboteurs. So they actually came to me in a dream, as a lot of my business ideas do.
Cool.
And at that point, I was not ready to accept it. It felt big. It felt scary.
Yeah.
And usually I take fast action on my ideas. But this one, I was really nervous about putting out. And I think when you have so much resistance to something, it's usually because it is
exactly. Yeah.
A big move.
Yes. And it's the thing. It's the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that when I then actually took action on the Success Saboteurs, it took me about 6 months. So I had the dream in sort of January of 2020, and I didn't release it. And I initially just released it as this online assessment. It's a free assessment. If you're listening, you can go and do that on my website. I just released this online assessment about them, first of all. And my audience just went crazy for it. And they were like, well, what's the next step? I had nothing to offer at that point. And they were like, what's the next? We want more of this. And that's when the Ultimate Up-Level Academy that addresses the healing of all the different Success Saboteurs was born. And that ended up being my first $1 million year, when I really stepped into this bigger purpose that my dreams had been calling me to. And that was completely mind-blowing because at the start of that year, my business was making like 30K months, 20K months.
Which is still
amazing.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know. Incredible. I had no idea that the end that year would be $1 million a year.
Yeah.
And it was all organically as well with a small audience. You know, I only had a couple of thousand people in my audience at that point too. So I think a lot of them,
which is one of the most amazing things too. Like for anybody who's listening, like you only have you have a few more now, like maybe 4,000 or 5,000 now, but still such a small audience for the profit that you create. So it's seriously amazing.
I think a key thing is, you know, what we said about relationships earlier being the most important thing. Like,
yes.
I believe in a relationship-based approach to success. Yes. And I guess I'm a good testimonial for my own work, you know, that, you know, focusing on treating people as people and giving them a good service and not just seeing them a sale.
Which social media can so desensitize. And when I look back, like I worked at an online dating company and we generated like 40,000 leads a day. And I realized like back then, even in the teams that I worked in and just the overall culture was like, yes, you're very it was very desensitizing in terms of like, we had this online dating membership and it was like churning thousands of people a day. And so there was this desensitization to the people on the other end. And so a lot of things were happening that were out of integrity. So not just the fact that I had nowhere to grow there. I really was like, this is really unaligned to just my values as a person, because I'm like, I am a very relationship based person. Like I thrive on intimacy and all of these things. So I didn't realize actually until way later how much that actually did affect me. Like we didn't even have phones on our desks. Like I didn't even have a phone or anything on our desk. Like it was just constant, like just computer and that's it. And like even talking, like, and that's so funny because like even talking to the person next to you, you wouldn't turn around and talk to them. Like you'd actually just Slack them. And I'm like, I know a lot of companies are like that. And it's like, it does get to a point where it's just really not healthy. Because like you spend more time there than you do at home sometimes, especially if you're in a corporate job or like sometimes it just in workplaces, like you do spend more time in them than you do at home. So
it's especially unhealthy if you're actually sitting next to them and then slacking them as well.
Yes, that was just the culture. Like that was the vibe. There'd be just group chats and like we were just all there like next to each other and there'd just be group chats on Slack like all day, like going off all day. While you were doing your work. Like it was just so desensitizing and like it did affect my mental health for sure. Like it's like that the analogy of like the frog in boiling water. Like, you know, you put it in cold water and then it just gets warmer and warmer and warm. You know, like at the start it all seems amazing and like you know, and I learned a lot there and it was like great opportunity. But then over time it's like it just starts to affect you in so many ways, like mentally, spiritually, emotionally, everything. So which is another thing which leads us into so actually the success saboteurs, so they are imposter, hustler, overgiver and the outcast.
That's right.
So would you say most, because it's interesting because most people think, that if you're successful in business already, that it's like, well, you don't have any success saboteurs. Like you're just successful. Like, and I'm like, it's so not true. Because I actually used to get that reflected to me, even in my career and I was earning great money. I was like, but I don't feel successful. Like I had my biggest one was imposter for sure. Like I never felt successful. I was like, but I've just worked super hard to get here, but I never felt like a success. I actually always felt like an imposter or it was just luck. I was like, like I just put myself in the right places at the right time.
And that
really, yeah, and actually now that we're talking about it, it really came out when I started to look for other jobs because I couldn't get hired anywhere, even though I was highly skilled. Even though I knew what I was doing and all of these things, I was like, no one would hire me. It was like either I wasn't, I wasn't qualified enough, like in terms of like managing big teams or like all of this, or it was like you're too overqualified. And so and I didn't realize, but at the time, like that was full on my imposter saboteur. I just felt like an imposter, even though that's the career I'd been doing my whole, like my entire 20s and I had a degree in business marketing and all of these things. It's just crazy. The
imposter does normally come up with like highly qualified, highly naturally successful people. It's almost like it hides your true game. Yes.
Why is that?
It all comes down to trust and your trust in yourself. But trauma, especially, I know you mentioned a background of narcissism.
Yes, for sure. Mine was like talk about invisible and just trying to play small and all of that. Like that was me. Yeah.
Also, that affects our level of self-trust. So if you have something in your adult life which re-triggers some of that childhood stuff without you even noticing or realizing that's what's happened, it brings up this massive self-doubt, indecision, inability to trust yourself, which is the root, that they're all of the symptoms of the imposter saboteur, really.
Yeah, and it literally reflects back to you, like from your external experiences and your world. Like it just reflects back to you. It's like, so
in business, that looks like, that transition sometimes from corporate to setting up your own business.
That was like a whole nother imposter. It was just like I felt like I was just starting from scratch. Like I felt like I needed to have a PhD in entrepreneurship before I could even start a business. Like that's how bad it was.
Yeah, well,
and I was charging peanuts. Like I was charging like $500 a month or something for like clients for me to do their marketing and like influencer campaigns. Like it was just ridiculous.
I remember looking for like some sort of coaching course, even though I'd been like I was a specialist social worker who did rapid 6-week interventions. I had all these degrees and masters and all on the job training than any coaching certificate could ever give me, and I still felt like, I need a coaching certificate to work as a coach.
Actually, that's the one thing I never did. I actually never did a coaching certification, not because I didn't want to, but actually no, there was a little bit of me that didn't want to, because I kept seeing a lot. Like I actually worked with a few coaches who I'm like, yeah, they had coaching certifications and they could market and sell themselves, but I was like, I didn't get any transformation out of it. I didn't it wasn't a good experience or whatever it was. And I also felt like I know so much more than them just because of my life experience. And I know there's a difference between life experience and like practical wisdom and all of these things. But even growing up, like my mum was a social worker. I also grew up with a cousin who was a psychologist. Yeah. So I actually saw them go to university and it was like a theme in our household and just in my family growing up. And it was funny because I actually always felt like the coach. I was always the one coaching them through their own stuff. And I'm like, but you're the qualified one. And so, that's kind of how I ended up just really, when I came across even the coaching industry in general, I didn't even know it existed. Like I knew about Tony Robbins and stuff, but I didn't know that I could become a coach. Like I didn't know that I could actually help people. And I started off helping women heal from narcissistic abuse. That was actually how I started. But it's not really what I do anymore so much. Like it's all linked in some way, but I don't focus on it. I don't niche on it because it's
deep,
it's quite heavy and it can get really dark. And I realized that it's just again it just wasn't it wasn't the niche definitely that I wanted to be in. But
I naturally come across a lot of my clients that do have that, but and we work with that
Yeah.
but it's not a focus. I think that's quite intense to have to do that day in, day out.
Yeah.
Especially when it's your own experience as well. And
yeah, my brain is just such a researcher. Like if I don't know if you know anything about, I'm obsessed with human design and gene keys. Like that's really my niche. And I focus more on that because it really does bring you back to your true self, and it just gives you not just validation, but really helps you see like all the ways that you're conditioned to go against your true self. And so I'm very much more focused on that because that's the thing that's probably just helped my life so much more, and find joy and follow my joy so much more. But in saying that, I really, going through narcissistic abuse, like it is so it's so crippling. Like it really can ruin your life, like for the rest of your life. Like it's so bad that I really thought I wanted to help people with that, but at the same time it's like, and I needed to know the foundations of it. My brain is like, I need to know everything there is to know about it, and I need to know how it works, how the mind, literally, became obsessed. I'm like, I need to know how the mind works and all of that. But it was more so for me because I was like, I want to protect myself from future things. And so like now I'm like a ninja. I can probably tell within, an hour or so, but also like I'm not a magnet for it anymore. Whereas, before I just used to be a match to it, and it was just it was crazy. Like it was really torturous at some point. Like it was just bad karma. It just felt like bad karma over and over and over again. And I couldn't break the pattern, and it was so frustrating, but so painful. But now it's like I've healed so many of those wounds, but also like it's just like a spiritual thing. Like now if that kind of vibrated into my life, like I just wouldn't even be affected by it. Like I would almost just laugh because I'd be like, I know what it's about and I'm not even available for it. So it's just so different. But yeah, it does take, I did that more for myself, but I realized like teaching it, and that is a whole other thing. There are some amazing experts out there though that really do help you. And I think the more you do understand how it works, the more you can kind of protect yourself from falling into those traps again. But it is really a whole niche on its own.
It is definitely. That the healing of narcissism, not just that, but that does come into healing the overgiver saboteur, because that is the one that's most connected to
100%. Yes, well, they're all connected in some way, right? Like it just affects your life in so many different ways, and being
so many dimensions of it. That's why healing one true root of what I call the relational roots of these saboteurs.
Yes.
Have such an impact, not just in your business, because I'm really passionate about not only focusing on business success, as you know, that doesn't fulfill you. And it can be very disillusioning, like that experience you had where you get to the 6-figure year or the 7-figure year or whatever it is you're aiming for, and you're just like, I thought this was going to feel
it. Yeah, it's not fulfilling.
Yeah, unless you are also having that healing impact in your relationships and yourself and your health, and
I
like to put it like multi-dimensional.
Until it trickles into all areas of your life. Like, I think the fulfillment piece is something that we definitely don't focus on a lot, just in our culture in general, and just in society in general. It just seems like it's almost like the thing. Yeah, this is the lie. It's the false lie that it's like once you get there, then you'll be happy. Then you can look for fulfillment. It's like so backwards. And it's like, actually, you can find fulfillment right now in the work that you're doing. And actually, the more you follow that, it doesn't just have to be joy, like super excited in the moment. It can just be like a subtle, fulfillment in just the little things. Like, and I found that with coaching, like when I started off doing the narcissistic abuse, like, sure, it wasn't the niche that I wanted to go in and become an expert on or teach, but even just with some of the women that I worked with, it was just so fulfilling because they would walk away feeling stronger, like more empowered, feeling more kind of equipped to deal with their daily life. And it was just like so fulfilling. And so, I think that's the lie. Like we think that it's supposed to be, and that was how I lived my life. Like I'll be happy when. when I reach this, and like blah blah blah, and it's like, and then the day never comes, and you're like, what? And then you realize the truth. So which is still something, even though I've deconditioned a lot out of that, it's still something that you can get caught up in and get trapped in. So it's like a constant being aware of our patterns and the conditioning.
Honestly, like, even though I've done so much healing, and this is the thing, I think there is no such thing as fixing yourself because you're not broken in the first place. It's just these layers of, like you say, deconditioning, or you're just unveiling who you really were before all these wounds happened. And even now, I got myself in a place, I think last year, where I was comparing myself to people who had grown like even more than me. Even though I had a multi-7-figure business, 2 children, because I had another baby, he's just over 1 now. So like I was a new mum again, and I was comparing myself to other, because it just got the online space just got really focused on like money, and money is a big thing for me and a big thing to my clients, because I'm here to show women that they get to make a lot more money for themselves and their families. That's one key part of what I do, but through the healing and the success in all areas of their life, not just their business.
There's nothing wrong with that. And it's like the more you heal yourself, actually, the more joy you find in the goals that you set for yourself, which is,
and the less you hold yourself back as well. So you're taking fast action. Your energy is different because you're vibrating through joy and passion and all these positive feelings. And that is magnetic to other people, whether that's personal relationships or clients. But I got caught up in this whole like race for more. That was and I, even though I'd done so many layers of healing, I was comparing myself to other women and these who had grown like a little bit faster. And I got to the point where I was like, actually, I don't need more. Like, why am I comparing myself to people who are not mothers, or they haven't got young kids right now? Actually, what I'm doing is enough. Like, there comes a point where you're like, when is enough enough?
Well, I feel like it's just a human thing, right? Like, it's just a human, natural, actual response. Like when you, especially like when you're in a field that's like, it is kind of so siloed in a way. It is like this, what's the word I'm looking for? Like echo chamber. When you're in this echo chamber of like, that's all you see all the time. It's like, well, that's just your world. So that's just, it's just a natural human thing, but it's the emotional intelligence that we have that brings us out of that. It was like, you don't need more, but you may desire it. You may have a goal for it, which is amazing. But it's when it takes us out of that fulfillment and like, oh, what am I really doing this for? And just constantly coming back to that. Why, do you think? Or
I think it's trying to not get caught up in the comparison piece, which is linked to enoughness usually. But also, everybody's business is going to be different, but everybody's definition of success is different. So don't get caught up in trying to build someone else's definition of success, really. Like I remember a client once saying, my income hasn't doubled. Or she'd say, I haven't hit this 10K month that she wanted. And financial goals are always a big reason people work with me. They've usually hit a plateau, but actually they don't realize what they need is all of this healing to shift that. And I remember her saying, she's like, I'm pregnant. I haven't hit the 10K months yet. I don't feel like I've got results. I'm working half as much as I used to. And it's like, so you've effectively doubled your income, but instead you've halved your hours. You're earning the same money, working half as much as you used to, with a baby on the way. That is success. Like, sometimes people
so it's like, what are you comparing your level or version of success to?
Because you do a 10K month if you've had to work double for that when you've got a new baby on the way. You would rather like sometimes people just don't even see how successful they already are and the success that they are achieving because they're looking at someone else's version of success.
Do you think that's more common in women than it is in men? I mean, naturally competitive, but like with women, it's more a comparison thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely a comparison thing. But also, I think, would I say women are more influenced by this? I think men and women in business are so different. Like men, yes, they have the saboteurs as well, but not in the same way. I think there's very different challenges
really
that women overcome with business compared to
so different. Like men definitely don't overgive in business. I don't think I've ever seen a guy overgive.
No, I've got
That's
such
like,
good boundaries usually as well. Like there's overgiving and poor boundaries is probably the most common toxic in women entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So interesting.
And then the outcast saboteur, just super quickly, the outcast saboteur is this like fear of visibility, fear of being rejected, and not really being seen for who you are. And if you think about women and men might also have visibility fears, but women have so much more in that in terms of we weren't safe. Historically, we weren't safe. Ancestrally, you think about the witch wound, all of these different things are linked in with women having a fear of being seen.
That's I would say, like my biggest one was imposter, but I would say generally, if I look at it, like the visibility thing is probably the biggest general block that I see. I don't mean block, but just almost like avoiding it, like trying to, even when I think about when I actually first started so it was called the Happiness Guide. I started like this Instagram page. It was called the Happiness Guide. But it wasn't a personal brand. Like I was just posting stuff and I was like, I realized later I'm actually hiding because like I didn't want to be seen. And so we do that and it's like very unconscious and it's like, okay, this is a visibility thing and I'm actually terrified of being seen. And I see it actually in some other healers that I work with, and I'm like, their work is so amazing, like what they're doing is great, but they're just their marketing and sales, or they think they have a money problem when it's really a marketing and sales thing, and they really have these fears that are like visibility and other things where I'm like, if you just were visible, like it would be amazing, and like you'd make the money and you'd hit your goals. And
there's the visibility piece, but also like allowing themselves to be truly seen for the gifts that they have. So they often hide in behind selling a modality.
Yes.
They feel safer to sell a modality, or a lot of the time I see like really.
Can you share the difference between for people, like the difference between a modality and a spiritual gift?
Coming out of the spiritual closet is a whole visibility journey in itself.
Yes.
So, you can train in a modality, whether that's something like hypnotherapy or breath work. But what happens is people try to sell the modality or my own modality that I teach. Heart healing is just one of my tools, but people train in that.
Yes.
But people don't buy a modality, they buy a result. So what people tend to do, because they hide in behind, first of all, they don't highlight why they are unique in what they do, even though they're trained in a modality. They've got all this life experience that they bring in, their own unique gifts, maybe intuitive gifts or psychic gifts or spiritual gifts that they combine in without even realizing it sometimes with their healing practice or the modality that they're trained in. So they're not differentiating themselves as different or unique, and that is something that is linked to the outcast. You don't want to be seen as different in case you're outcast from society.
Yes, this is what I love about you, Natasha, too, and I see in your marketing, like you own your gifts so well. Like there's no wobbles, there's no nothing. It's like, and you do it so gracefully. Like it's not like, like sometimes I know, like I've in the past tried to like own my gifts, but it's like because it's still wobbly, you kind of cringe when you look back. You're just like, oh, so cringe. Like you're not fully owning it yet, but like the way that you market and sell, it's really like, it's just genius. Like you just do it in a way where you own it, but there's no,
on that journey though, you know, where I wasn't at the start. It was I think it's developed as well.
And I think with practice, like you do get better, like for sure. I definitely now own my gifts, like I see, and you can only really know it through working with people and through talking and having it reflected back and being mirrored back and all this. And like I've worked with lots of not just but business coaches and healers and therapists and just energy healers, and and like it's like you just start to, like, it all starts to just come out when you really step out, and you know, you're not just posting quotes online, like you're actually doing the work and you're actually working with people. So
just, can I share a little story around that? When I had the dream about the Success Saboteur archetypes, they weren't named what they are now. It was more like it's presented and then you turn it into something marketable. That tends to happen. But one of the archetypes was the priestess, right? And I did not know what a priestess was at that point.
Okay.
I was just like, I ignored that piece. I was like, because there was 5, right? And I ignored this 4, but I ignored the priestess because I didn't know what it was. I hadn't stepped into my own spiritual gifts fully enough to know or understand. And I'm actually a priestess. I've discovered that like further along the journey. But what happened when I wrote the academy, because I channel through writing and the creation of my courses, I channeled priestess activations within the imposter saboteur healing part. So the priestess did come into it, and that helped other women unlock the priestess in them and their spiritual gifts as part of that too. So it's almost like we deny the spiritual side of it sometimes because it is different. It is we worry what people
exposing. It's so exposing.
But actually embracing that was probably been the most transformational part of my journey personally, but also the success of my business and my clients getting even more powerful results as well.
Yes, and I see that through your marketing. One thing I love, I don't know where I heard this, but I was like, marketing is healing. Like when someone markets well, like it's actually the whole process of like consuming it and just reading it and whatever is like deeply healing. Anyway, that's what I love and that's what I'm attracted to. But I noticed that in your content, and I'd love to hear actually how your journey went with marketing and sales, because you know you are such an exceptional healer and you get so many results and you have so much business success, but like the marketing and sales is one of the biggest things, and like it is a skill all on its own. So I'm sure you know obviously practice over so many years, but did you go through the typical journey of like working with a business coach who told you to use this strategy and then you tried it and it didn't work, or like did you just kind of intuitively find your own way the whole way?
So I've got no background in business, so for any healers watching this, they're like, you know, you don't have to have this background in business or marketing to be a good marketer. For me, I didn't even have a coach. I didn't know about this whole coaching industry in the way that the business coaching industry until I was almost at the 5-figure month level anyway. So I just for me, it was like lots of trial and error, really. Like, but I've always had an ability to sell. Like when I look back at my journey, because I came from a very poor background, I always had to try and find my own ways to make money, creative ways to make money. Some negative ones and some more positive. So I just always had this passion or ability to sell, which obviously selling and marketing are very interlinked. So the journey, even when I look at my first ever business, I sold things that I was passionate about making, that I 100% stood by, and that I knew would have like a positive impact on people, whether that was health food or whether it's what I do now, like selling transformational results for your business or your relationships. But really, it was always like this belief that this is going to change your life. Like whether it was a raw bite that they were buying, and how amazing this raw bite is for you, and all of the health benefits in this raw bite, to healing all your parent wounds and unlocking more success in your business, and how that's going to completely change everything in your life. So I was always like my own best testimonial all along, and I really believed that this could help people.
Yeah, so like your whole heart and soul is just behind it. Yeah,
and then it's just like finding the right way to communicate that then, I guess.
Yes. So yeah, because so one thing I love about how you write your posts and just like your marketing in general is that you share your story so candidly. Like you share it so raw, like authentically and everything, but there's no victim vibe. And so I want to, because this is something that I've, fallen into. It's like, how do you share your story without it, like without going into this victim consciousness? Because sometimes there's a fine line, because sometimes you want to share your story, but it's not, if it's not empowering and it's not empowering for others, like it's not going to convert into sales or building like, a powerful brand. And so I think that's one thing that I see a lot, just what I see a lot, is like, people are brilliant at what they do, but sometimes there's still this victim consciousness that comes through the marketing. So is that, how do you find the difference? Because you don't have, like, yours are so empowering, but you share your story, which is really vulnerable, and there's a lot of, heavy stuff sometimes, but you never get like, there's never like a victim vibe. It's really empowering. It's always really like heart-centered, and I just always feel connected to it.
Thank you for that. I think, it's always really important to check with yourself, what is the purpose of this post that I'm sharing? And sometimes we can use posts to get validation, or sometimes we can use posts to offload something that perhaps isn't right for our audience to offload to. And I can catch myself doing that sometimes as well. But I think a big purpose behind.
Do you have a process for it? Because I've heard a lot of coaches say, like, there shouldn't be much thought behind behind the thought and the action. Like, you should just do it. Like, and in human design, like, I've learned a lot about myself, and I'm an emotional authority. And so sometimes that works. Like, sometimes intuitively, I'm just like 100% like, just go. But then a lot of times it's more, I have to wait for that emotional wave to just ride, because otherwise I am just blurbing out stuff that isn't really helpful to anybody, and it's probably more just for me.
So there is something I teach, because I do teach my marketing process to people as well. There's something I teach. I call it the silver lining principle. So anything that you're sharing about a wound or a journey, usually it's best to teach it from the coming out the other side of that, and what you've learned. What is the silver lining principles? So that's like the lesson or the inspiration that is coming from that the reader is going to take away. And the whole focus of the post is the silver lining principle, but the story leads to that. What is the lesson, the inspiration, or the transformation for the person reading this? And then your call to action comes after that, if you're using a call to action at all. And this usually means that the focus of the post is always service over sales. So there's always transformation, whether somebody wants to buy from you or not. And then the call to action and the sale is almost like an afterthought. And some people won't teach it that way, but that's how I've always approached marketing.
I feel that. I feel that in all your marketing, and that's why you're so successful. Really, it does work. It is the thing. And not everyone uses that, but every business is different. But I come from the corporate world where it was not that. Like, they very much preyed on your vulnerabilities and your weaknesses and all of these things. So I love
much aspirational marketing as well. So where you talk about the the journey that you've been on, but the benefits of working through that and coming out the other side, and showing your clients like hope and the aspiration, like what they can
the hope,
rather than always focus on pain, really.
Yeah, that's really what this podcast is. When I think about it, I'm like, closer than you think. It really is giving that hope, because I see a lot of people give up like so quickly on their journeys, and they make up a lot of meanings and a lot of stories that just, I'm like, they're just stories. And so so that's what I hope to do with just the value that we're giving and sharing, and so people can just really connect to like the person and just the work and everything and the journey, because it is really a hero's journey, and just seeing like the process, and if you see somebody who you can relate to, but it's not even so much that, it's more just like it's not like some A-list celebrity that just feels like, okay, that's so far away, or that's just like not even, when you see someone who's like you and has similar stories and journeys, you're just like, okay, that makes it so possible for me. Like the first business coach in the kind of feminine leadership world that I met, who's still my money coach today, Victoria Washington, it was the first time that I really realized there was like this path for me, because I realized, even though I thought I was lost and I didn't have much direction, what I realized was I really did just need that evidence of a creator that came before me to show me like, this is the path that I've created, and like, you can do it too. And so that was just so amazing for me. And so sometimes someone else just might need to be shown that there is this pathway, even if you're the first one to create it. So like, even if you're brave enough to create your own pathway, it's like the permission and the evidence that someone else needs to come, like before they get set on their journey.
That was huge for me, and the women that were making lots of money, even though I didn't know how or how I could do that, just knowing that it was possible, gave me that belief that it could happen for me too. And it did.
Yes. It's so important. And that's why, even being visible in the marketing and sales is so important too. Because I used to have a lot of blocks around even just the marketing and selling myself. Like, it was just so uncomfortable, and like the imposter syndrome, and like I had this huge thing around like being an influencer. Like it felt really cringy. I was just like I didn't work hard my whole life to just be an influencer. Like I had this really negative kind of outlook on it, but now it's so different. I'm like, no, but influence is important. And actually it's better for more people, more good people with good intentions and all of these things, and healers to be influential than it is, for other people to be louder. So I had to fully change my beliefs around that. I mean, so many beliefs and so many thoughts.
I resonate a lot with that, because that's how I felt about money, that money is bad and people with money are bad. And so I had to do a lot of like reframing.
And all connected, like the influence and the money and the power, like all of it, really.
Yeah.
Okay. So can you just speak a little bit on the spiritually guided thing? How you said most of your success has been spiritually guided. Like, would you say it's intuitive, or like, just a little bit on that before we wrap it up?
Yes, I would say it's a mix. I did have a lot of, I guess what you might call spiritual experiences, spiritual gifts when I was younger. But it used to scare me then, and I blocked it out quite a lot. But then, just as I started my first business, a health business, I had a dream about making peanut butter. I know it sounds a bit funny, making peanut butter, and that was one of my products at the time. And I got in my car the next morning and found a white feather in my car on the way to the gym. I have no idea how it got in there. And that was like my sign that I needed to follow the dream and start my business. So every different version or evolution of my business has been guided by dreams. And then a lot of my ideas, sometimes they come to me in dreams or through silent meditations. Intuitively, I would say a lot of it is, but also it's like combining that with all of my own personal wisdom and professional wisdom as well. which makes it really unique. You know, a lot of my techniques for healing relational wounds and trauma have come from my own personal journey, as well as some spiritual techniques and some scientific proven
so
techniques.
unique. And that's what I love about you and your work too, because it's not just like one modality or like one thing. Actually, you do a lot of things like very masterfully. And I think you're a manifesting generator too, aren't you? Yeah. And it's like I found we obviously tend to like to do a lot of different things, and we just are multi-passionate in that way. And actually the multi-passionate thing when you're starting out is really it feels so limiting when it's actually the thing that's gonna propel you to your success. But just getting to that, even like when I started like niching down, like I thought I just had to have one niche, and so I just focused on that one niche, and it was just so not the thing. And I really felt like siloed in. Did you ever have that, or did you just because you have lots, like you have your personal brand, you also have heart healing certification, which is like a whole nother business in itself, like and then you have your personal brand and the coaching business and all of that, so you juggle a lot of things. It's amazing.
There is a lot going on, but yeah, very multi-passionate. So I'm a creator and an innovator at heart, and so I kind of satisfy that part through creating new courses. But you know, even that can get too much sometimes. For me, what was really important was I niched on a person rather than a topic necessarily. So like I love helping somebody heal their narcissistic mother wound, or I'm an expert at helping people heal from sexual abuse. You know, all these. I love helping people make more money. You know, so but because I work with business women, I get to help them. I niched to the person rather than I kept my topic so broad that anything could come under it, really. So one day I could be doing a narcissistic healing wound session with someone. The next day I'm channeling a new healing session around healing their relationship with money. You know, like it's so varied what comes under it that I never get bored.
Yes. I love how you do it. Like you make it sound so simple. Like that's the thing. I got caught up, and this is, I guess this is like the entrepreneurial mind, and just like knowing how to navigate the mind in that way, I guess, because like I got so caught up in my own like having to niche and like just siloing myself and like not really knowing how to practically break it down so simply, like you just said. But yeah, so that's amazing. And that will help, I think, a lot of if there's any managers, you know, watching this and struggling with niching and all of that. It's like you can do it all. Like you can do it all as long as you have like an umbrella brand, or you just keep a personal brand and just share. And the way that you share your gifts, like in every post, like it's just like you share everything. So like there's no confusion, you know, like there's no confusion in what you're doing and what you're about. Yeah.
I think when you focus on selling an outcome, you don't have to, like that outcome can be broad if you want it to, if you do need variety in your work.
Yes, so true. Okay, well, I just have a couple of questions that I ask every guest at the end. So what is your message to the world?
Wow, that's a big one. I think, you know, my main message is to women, that I really believe that all women should have the ability to be able to choose themselves and to walk away from anything that isn't right for them, whether that's personal or work related. And I really believe that healing so that they have more money to be and the ability to, the confidence, I guess, to walk away from situations and be able to put themselves and their children first.
Yes.
That will change the world.
Yes.
I really
liberate
believe
themselves from. Yes. Okay, love it.
and that anyone, no matter what you've been through, like healing is possible for you, and more abundance, whatever that is to you, is possible for you as well, even if you don't know how right now. But just that belief and the trust that it can happen for you is the first step, really.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who has that kind of mentality, like, yeah, okay, but that's easy for you because XYZ, or that's easy for you to say because like, and that it's like, yeah, that might be true for you, but it's not true for me. What would you say to that person?
Most of the best entrepreneurs come from difficult backgrounds who probably all believe that what they achieved on paper should not have been possible for them. And I think it's key to be able to turn your wounds into wisdom and the wealth that then comes from that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that. I would say find a higher power. Like for me, it was really I turned to God, but not in the sense of like a religious sense. I actually changed my relationship to God completely when I, just in my 20s, because I grew up in a very Catholic, strict religious household. So I actually had a lot of religious trauma. So I changed my relationship to God completely, but it's really what got me through some of my toughest times. It really became more about connecting to a higher power, and something that it was like, yeah, it really forced me, not forced me, but like I chose to surrender into that there are just certain things that I just can't control, and that and actually understanding that my suffering or my challenges aren't all that unique. I think when we make our challenges so unique, like we're the only ones with that problem and we're the only ones that, this happened to, or like it's easy for you because XYZ. And it's like, yes, you may be right at the bottom of, the people on the earth who have it the hardest, like, sure. But most of the people that will be watching this will, it's like your suffering isn't unique. Your challenges aren't unique. Your things aren't unique. And that,
I really resonate with what you're saying there, because everyone has the success saboteurs. Yeah. So everyone struggles with the same things. Yeah. They might just have different reasons or experiences that have led to that. But we're all the same.
Yes.
With the same thoughts, the same
times I struggled the most, and like where my mindset was the worst, or I was like the most kind of in my dark night of the soul moments, was where I really felt like I'm the only one experiencing this, and like it's like the worst, and I'm just like, yeah, like my suffering is unique in some way. And then but obviously there's a lot of shame and guilt in that. And when you start sharing it, when you start realizing most people either have similar things or some have it worse, and it's like, then you can just kind of put it into perspective is all. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Which doesn't minimize it in any way, just puts it into perspective, I guess. Yeah. Okay, amazing. So, the last couple of questions. So, what's one piece of business wisdom you found out the hard way?
One piece of business wisdom. I think it's probably this thing around boundaries, really, which is something that a lot of women struggle with, especially if you've got a strong overgiver saboteur. That like, even if it's a friend or somebody always have a contract. I think, we're also not used to being like, especially if you have an overgiver as well.
Yes.
You're not used to being protected, but actually you have a right to protect yourself through your business. Feeling safe in your business is an essential foundation for success. And that means having those physical boundaries in place, things like contracts, even with people who you think you trust, who you think would never do anything to upset you or hurt you in any way. Keep it clean, and business is business, whether it's someone you know or not.
Yes. Yes, I've seen my parents go through some things. My dad's a builder, so there was lots of things that I saw there. Even men actually can lack boundaries in that area too, but yeah, definitely women too, with the boundaries. And yeah, I think there's sometimes just a fear, like, I don't know, it's the people pleasing thing, like, oh yeah, no, it'll be fine, like I won't make this too hard or harder than it needs to be, and like we just but it's like those things create the bad karma that you don't want. So it's like you're better to put more boundaries in place, like more things in place before, instead of less, because it will serve you in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. If I could just say one more, it would be follow your intuition. Every time I haven't,
Yes,
it led to like, you know, a circumstance that
and actually,
like
I want to say, yes, I fully agree with that. I want to say, because, you know, I've heard a lot of people say follow your intuition, and I fully do that, and I do that too. And I followed that even when I quit my corporate job. It was just intuitive. I was like, I just need to quit. Like, there's no other. I didn't even have anything else lined up. I didn't have anything else set up. And when I went to Bali, I was there for a month, but about 3 days before I left, I got a job offer and I went to work for a university. So it was just like, but I had already quit, and it was just like all lined up. So I followed my intuition, and the universe will always support you in that. But also with your ideas, something that I learned last year was like, I truly believe ideas are consciousness. Like, and if the ideas are coming through you and you don't act on them, actually they're just going to go to somebody else in order for them to act on it. And that's why when people have ideas and you see it come through somebody else and you're like, oh my God, like I thought of that, but I didn't act on it. And then like that person goes on to have massive success or like whatever it is. And then you're like, why didn't I do that? And it's like, well, now they took it and now they're running with it, because the idea went then, and it might not be identical, but it might be similar. And so every time I realized I've like let ideas or just not acted on them like quickly enough or in time, or doubted them or thought like, oh yeah, like it's not that big of a deal. And then you see it and then you're like, So that's also another way to look at like intuitions. It's like, yes, your gut, but also the ideas that come through.
Yeah, definitely. And I also find like the speed of acting on it as well is important. If I let my mind get in the way and like, oh, it's not the right time to put that, and start thinking logically about it, I find that it loses the magic
Totally.
it would have if I had just taken it and run with it and put it out there like my intuition was telling me to.
That is the feminine leadership thing, isn't it? Like it's the magic that we bring to it that the logical mind just can't match. Yeah, I love it.
The more I try to like as my business has grown, it's become it's more structure, but the more we try to add in like the corporate-y logical, like it just, you cannot corporatize this business.
I know. Do you find that as you've grown that you like, or you feel like you become more corporate, or do you feel like you lose the magic? Like, how do you balance that actually?
It's when it's just you or maybe like one or two people in the team, it's a lot easier. But as the teams become bigger and the businesses become bigger, we have had so many people come in to try and streamline like behind the scenes, and they've tried to corporatize their business, and that feels like a ball and chain to me, and it just does not feel right energetically. So I had to have a team meeting with my LinkedIn, and I was just like, guys, we got to find a balance between the two. Like, we are not a normal business, we're not a logical business, and we can't lose the magic that comes from just like, you know, bringing in manifesting techniques, following intuition, and not everything can be planned and structured as much as you might want everything to be planned and structured. It just doesn't work that way in the same way. So it's definitely been a journey of trying to find the balance as you grow to, you know, the higher levels.
Sounds like you just give yourself permission to just not let it get that way. Like, because even with all my corporate conditioning, it's something that I had to, I spent so much time deconditioning from it, like, because I'm actually not really a planned person. Like, yes, I have that corporate background, and I'm like, yes, I have the corporate background, and I like I learned that way. Like, I learned to be planned and structured and all that, but I genuinely don't enjoy it. Like, I'm not a planned person. I'm not, yes, I love a good spreadsheet and all of that, but I'm not, like I'm actually definitely more wild at heart. Like, I'm just more like, okay, like let's do this and let's do that. And like, I don't care if everything's like not perfect. And I had to do a lot of deconditioning around that. And I've realized like some people genuinely are really good at planning and like certain things. And, you know, there's a difference between that and being a perfectionist. But yeah, I think with businesses like healing businesses and coaching businesses, like there's only so much structure you can have before the magic goes away. Because then it just becomes like a machine. And I've seen that. I actually worked for a business coaching company. I was their content marketer. I actually had a lot of trauma from that job. Also, another story. I actually think they were psychopaths. Like, genuinely, I think now looking back, I've worked for a lot of narcissists, but I think, these people were actually borderline psychopaths. Because, like, with narcissists, you can kind of tell, like, the inner child is in the lead. Like, it's always just like that very reactive, like almost kind of inner child. But with a psychopath, it's more like it's very calculated. Everything's very calculated. Everything's very, I had a lot of PTSD after that. But anyway, I worked for them and it was just so planned that you just felt like a robot. Like it was just robotic.
Yeah.
Crazy. Okay, the last, so two more. What's one piece of life wisdom you want people to remember?
It's kind of linked to business as well, so hopefully it's okay, but it's more like build your business around your life, not the other way around. I've made that mistake. And we do come into business for more freedom, and sometimes we end up building a bigger cage for ourselves than a job might be. And I think it's to have fulfillment in your business, you really need to have fulfillment in your life and not be sacrificing your life for your business.
Yes, so true. And I think that that's still something I'm learning to grasp fully because like in the system and culture that we live in, like it really is this kind of underlying expectation or theme of just like a cage, unfortunately. Like just like everything's built around work, like your life, your choices, like everything that you do is, and for actually most people it is that way. Like everything revolves around your work, like where you work, like how long you work, like everything. So yeah, when you step into business, you're like, actually you're doing it for the freedom and you're doing it to create a different lifestyle. And so yeah, remembering that is so important because it's like true liberation in so many ways. Like, yeah, I love it. Okay, and the last question is, if you blank, fill in the blank, you're closer than you think.
Two is coming up. Believe came up first, yeah. But also trust. I think trust has been the most important piece for me in my journey. So I'm going to go with trust, I think. If you trust, you're close.
I love that. Yes, self-trust, which is easier said than done when you haven't exercised it. So the more you exercise it,
not just self-trust, but self-trust is key, yeah, but also that trust, like you mentioned, in something higher. Like for me, that was spirituality. Yes. For you, that was God.
Yes.
But the trust that everything is working out for you the way that it's meant to be.
Yes, it's so true. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing everything that you did and just your story, and just you're such an inspiration. And yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing everything.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.